Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Leibowitz. A topic that has always caused me a lot of bewilderment is that of animal rights. And the reason being is that I absolutely love animals. I think that anybody that would intentionally cause unnecessary pain to animals is depraved, but yet I'm unable to find a way to say that that type of behavior should be unlawful. So today I'm going to have a discussion with my friend, James Valliant. Welcome back, Jim.
Hey, great to be back.
And I'm going to confess at the outset that I have a bias here. And normally this isn't how I go about reasoning. I'm starting here with a conclusion I'd like to reach, and I'm going to see if I can reach it. Which
Well, it's
it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean we're going to be illogical or evade or invent stuff. I'm just saying that that's not my normal method of trying to come to conclusions.
we call it testing a hypothesis, checking out a hypothesis. You know when I'm as a historian of things ancient, where the evidence is fragmentary, when someone proposes a theory, what I say is put on those shoes and walk around in it and see if it is consistent with all the evidence to even think, get us off the ground to think this could be a valid approach. So if we're testing out, what did Aristotle say? The test of a wise man is his ability to entertain an idea without.
Ah,
And so we need to engage in precisely these things. And I agree with you. I mean, in Atlas Shrugged itself, in the opening pages of the last chapter of the novel, Dagny Taggart, the heroine, spoiler alert, kills somebody with a gun. But Ayn Rand describes her as the following: she who would have hesitated to hurt an animal shot the gun and shot the man. And so, under certain circumstances, she's saying it's perfectly okay to use force in self-defense and defense of others, obviously. But notice how she prefaces it. Dagny, her heroine, would never have harmed an animal that she never had to. She would have hesitated were it an animal to shoot. So Ayn Rand's soul is with you on this. In other words, Ayn Rand's emotional position. Now, she herself loved animals too. I mean, when people would walk into an apartment, if she wasn't busy talking to someone, what you would see her doing is laying on the couch with one of her cats on top of her chest. That was her favorite relaxed position, was reclining on the couch with a cat on top of her if she wasn't sitting next to her husband and holding hands with him. So she loved animals, and she herself had expressed your desire, if there were some way, if we could figure out a way, because they can't have rights in her sense. The justification for rights under objectivism has to do with human nature and the distinct nature of human consciousness. If I were to say, for example, let's take some of the concrete applications of rights: freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Those ideas are simply inapplicable to animals, simply inapplicable. They don't possess reason, and therefore they don't have the need for freedom in certain contexts, which even our founding fathers recognized the context of, because they're just not rational animals in the same sense humans are. The conceptual mind cannot be forced. I can point a gun at you and I can, make you say the moon is made out of grain cheese, but can I make you believe in your own mind that the moon is made out? No, the mind can't be forced. And more than that, when I point a gun, I render your basic tool of survival inoperative. Only my judgment now counts. Your judgment is rendered null and void to your own life. And therefore, I've disconnected your means of survival from your action and therefore disabled it, in effect. That's why physical coercion is wrong among humans. Humans should not be forcing each other. Their relation should be voluntary. Well, why? We can persuade. We have a means of persuading one another. Can I persuade an animal? No, I cannot. I can't have a discussion conceptually. There's all I can do is condition an animal through rewards and punishments. And those are only the smart animals, by the way. But on the other hand, they're still conscious beings. And these mammals have all kinds of emotions that are the perfect analog to our emotions. They feel affection, they feel fear, they feel suffering. Domesticated animals are animals that we've bred, that we've taken responsibility for. And the idea of people. Now, on the other hand, Animals themselves have to deal with one another by force. That's another important part of the context. Even within a single pride of lions, they can't persuade one another. They're using physical force to determine hierarchy and what they do. They treat each other with physical force. Between species, it can be downright brutal. So humans have a rational capacity which operates volitionally, and that is the justification for their freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And without that context, we can't really say animals have rights in that sense at all. They do not. Indeed, we must be free, it seems to me. I mean, look at us biologically. We eat animals. Our ancestors wore animals. In fact, in the modern age, I think we should be free to even engage in medical experiments, not unnecessary medical, but think of how many medical breakthroughs were made possible. Open heart surgery, all kinds of things were made possible because of animal experimentation. And do I think you should try it out on animals before you try it on you? Yeah, I do. And I think that's an easy moral call to make for me, however much I love animals. Now, on the other hand, I cannot stand bullfights. The whole idea of cockfighting is a repellent to me. Why would you send animals into such, just simply torture them to death? I mean, it is grotesque. It is inhuman. There is a correlation between people who are sadistic against animals and who engage in violent crime. But we can't use that really as the basis. We never say because there's something correlated to a future crime, we can now anticipate.
No, that would be abhorrent.
That would be anticipatory. We can't do that. So the issue of animal rights, I agree, is a complex one. We cannot use our traditional objectivism if we're going to find a way to prevent animal cruelty, unnecessary animal cruelty. But it is one where my heart is exactly where you are. Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff's heart is exactly. I saw Leonard, the way Leonard loved his beloved Kiki, and that guy loves dogs, and he loved that dog in particular. And we really can have such feelings. You know, another place Leonard Peikoff says, it was asked about unconditional love. As an objectivist, it makes an important distinction here. Adults must be judged for their virtue. They really must be. I have to judge you on a virtue scale. When it comes to children, when it comes to animals, it's really not, morality is not fully applicable. They're not volitional beings. So he said unconditional love really only applies to small children and animals. They're the ones we can unconditionally love just because they're living beings. And so, yeah, we love children, we love animals, but children are humans. They're becoming, in fact, they're on a scale of becoming conceptual, which is a gradient. Where exactly does that kick in? Well, that's different. And besides, they're developing into it all along.
Sure. Okay.
So they're different. Even children are different than animals.
I think there's a better case, and I'm not saying I'm 100% convinced by it. I'm just saying I think that there's the potential for a case under the traditional objectivist viewpoint that animals may have rights. So in order to, but I want to stipulate some things for the record, and I want you to tell me where you disagree. Okay. Rights are a moral concept. The base of morality is the fact that human beings have a volitional conceptual consciousness. Okay. Animals differ in intelligence. Some animals are far smarter than others.
Yeah.
Animals also differ in their sensitivity to pain. They differ, like you said, lions, lived to a high degree by force. Animals differ in the degree to which they live by force. They don't generally, cows don't live by force. Rabbits don't brutalize each other.
Actually, you know something? Cows are a domesticated animal, and so their propensity to get along with people has been, to a degree, bred into them. Even though a herd of cows, you can only have one bull, or a flock of domesticated chickens, you can only have one rooster. Well, why is that? The males will treat each other with force and fight it out.
Sure. That's why I specifically said cows, not bulls.
Each other by force. Well, the females are pretty passive, but if you who knows you've got two ungelded bulls in the same small region, you're going to have trouble. Anyone who knows animals knows this, and that's why most of the males in domesticated herds are killed shortly after their birth, because we only need one rooster, we only need one bull to repopulate the group, and besides, the males go after each other.
Sure.
So you
And
see,
and
the key is not that the degree of force. The key is that they cannot deal with each other by reason.
no, they can't. I don't agree. I agree to that to an extent. To an extent, because this is here's the thing: animals also differ in the degree to which they show emotions, and specifically empathy and guilt. And empathy and guilt are indicative of some degree of reflection. What I mean by that is this: in order to feel guilt, one has to know the action that they took and assess that they did something they're not supposed to. A dog, when my dogs, they like to chew up the carpets and stuff. And there's this pillows, the stuff that fills the pillow. If I approach the dog with the stuff and I say, "Who did this?" They look down and they run away. They know they've done something they're not supposed to.
Well, they know they've done something that irritates you, and
Yes,
you're important to them.
I got it.
Let's say you'd come home and the pillow was torn up, and you'd reward it. Good boy. Oh, that's Daddy's good boy.
Then they would learn it.
Pillows without
Yeah, sure.
don't have a capacity for moral discrimination.
No, they don't. No, I'm my main point. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is that consciousness exists on a continuum. It's not a thing where, even within humans, where you have a child and then bang, all of a sudden there's this whole new development.
Bring up something I've been thinking about all week long. An example in the case of animal rights. I've been thinking about it. I admit it. And in the issue of animal rights, I actually thought of an example along the lines you're talking about. What about someone who's brain damaged as an adult and they need a guardian? The law is saying that they no longer possess the mental capacity for volitional consent in the same way that other adults do.
That's
And
right.
so guardian to make their legal and medical decisions. They can't sign contracts. And so their medical and legal decisions are being made by someone else because they're brain damaged. So they're not fully rational in that human sense anymore, at least for a time. Now imagine someone is permanently in such a state. Do we say they've forfeited their rights?
Some,
Or they have, obviously. We give them
but
the
you
guardian.
can't torture them.
But you see, in naming a guardian, we've said they need like a parent, or in this case, analogously, the pet owner. What we're saying is that they don't have the right of decision like children do, or like don't, or like animals don't. So this person requires a legal guardian. Now, what if we were to say that they're in this state permanently? Well, aren't they kind of, morally speaking, in an analogous situation to animals? That is to say, they are conscious, but they don't have a full conceptual consciousness that allows them the kind of legal volitional consent that we give to other adults. And yet, it would be, they have rights, don't they? It would be wrong to be cruel to them, wouldn't it?
Yes. And this is ultimately my point, is that if consciousness exists on a continuum, and our consciousness is the sorts of rights, is it possible that rights also exist on a continuum? And we kind of already acknowledge this in the case of children. For instance, as a child gets older, they get more and more rights. Right, a 5-year-old doesn't have the right to drink liquor, to
have different ages of consent for different things.
Absolutely.
Signing contracts, having sex.
Yes. And so I don't see why it would be impossible to say, for instance, that chimpanzees, gorillas, higher animals, dogs, elephants, for instance, that show remorse, they show sadness, guilt, why we couldn't argue that they have sort of nascent rights. And when I add to that the fact that, to me, it's unequivocal that torturing animals is unethical. I would not say, I would hold on. You keep like your voice keeps coming in and out. I don't know if something's wrong with your mic.
I'm sorry.
It
Is
might
it?
just be because I'm running my mouth over you. I don't know.
I'm interrupting you, sir.
But so it's unequivocal to me that it's unethical. Now, unethical does not mean it has to be illegal. I got that, right? But given everything that we've said, that consciousness exists on a continuum, that it's absolutely unethical to torture animals, is there an argument to be made that animals have a right not to be brutalized in the same way that the guy that you discussed has a right not to be brutalized, but he can't enter contracts and do those sorts of things? And that would still make way for the types of stuff that you talked about. Food is a necessity, right? Animals eat each other. We eat animals. That's a part of life. That's necessity. That doesn't necessitate shooting deer to put trophies up on walls. It doesn't necessitate torturing animals so that we can wear fur coats. And it doesn't necessitate slaughtering elephants for ivory, right? So there might be in there, and I'm not convinced there is, but I'm not convinced there isn't either, that
Well,
animals have nascent rights.
let me come back to the rights thing and the continuum of consciousness thing, because I think there's a difference in kind between even children and animals. And although consent kicks in, they are a developing conceptual consciousness. And that's why they have rights. They're this being of conceptual potentiality. And this is even true for someone who's brain damaged or injured. They look, do I know there won't be a cure tomorrow for what he's got? So there's still potentially a rational being. So I think we have to, in all human contexts, there is a difference with animals. On the other hand, I think, and I hope to hell, because I would love to see your argument take flight. It's always on a continuum, a difference of measurement. And I do think there's a big difference between, say, insects and fish and mammals and domesticated animals, because our domesticated animals are bred to get along with us. And that's why they echo back in some cases our emotions and are so and get along with us so well. We've bred that into them, and they're bred to be. And in many cases, they're bred to be utterly dependent on us. You know, there's certain species like a wheat that can't reproduce on it. It was a hybrid of two grasses that humans invented 10,000 years ago or more, and it can't reproduce on its own. But I don't think wheat has any feelings or rights. On the other hand,
No,
on the
no.
other there are animals that are dependent upon us by our doing, by our domesticated breeding. They're dependent upon us, and they have the ability to feel pain and suffering. And for example, and okay, so I think there is a difference between domesticated animals and mammals that I would recognize between, say, fish and insects, which I really think are at another order, because there is a continuum of consciousness here. There really is. But let me be kind of, when you use the word, Michael, let me be kind of libertarian here. I think there may be a free market, but at least partial free market solution. I think that in a free market about these things, people, if I created an organization, let's say, private organization that said, stop cruelty to animals, and what we're going to do is we're going to put into the contract of every sale of an animal, every voluntary gift of an animal, even every animal transfer will have a contractual, in consideration for the animal that you get, there's an implied requirement that you not sadistically torture this animal, that you not inflict unnecessary pain on the animal, insofar as the animal is property. Insofar as the animal isn't property, of course, if it's captured in the wild, we have an issue here, don't we? We still have an issue there. But the point is, I would say, hey, animal lovers of the world, even in a world that didn't have animal abuse laws, we do, by the way, have animal abuse laws. You cannot torture animals. It is against the law in all 50 states and in all of the developed countries. Animal cruelty is against the law. It's a crime. It's a crime. And what we're trying here to do is justify some aspect of that in a moral, legal way. But I think there are some free market answers that might be implied. That when we can even create a legal presumption that in an animal transfer, if I give you or sell you my animal, we'll presume in the law that you didn't want the animal to be unnecessarily tormented. There is, and let's face it, I think one of the promising ways of maybe starting to look at this to get somewhere is that there is no rational end served by simply inflicting pain. I distinguished eating, wearing, even the pleasure of their company, even medical experiments on animals. That's serving some end. What rational end at all could possibly being served by simply and unnecessarily sadistically tormenting a creature that can feel pain? None. There can be no rational end to animal torment. And so I think that's a helpful, perhaps, start. And I think there may be solutions like a legal presumption that whenever you acquire and transfer an animal, that they presume you're not going, the person who gave you or sold you that animal, gave and sold you that animal under the assumption that they wouldn't. Now, can legal presumptions be overcome? What if I transfer the animal and I say, yeah, you can torture it?
Right. Well,
Capture the animal, like you say, going hunting in the wild. That's nobody's property.
no.
And so even my approach, my libertarian approach about implied part of the contract, or maybe an explicit part of the contract, for those of us who care and start an organization to fight it, is probably insufficient, because I still haven't taken into account cruelty against animals taken in the wild. And the person who takes it in the wild, transferring it to someone, yeah, go ahead, sadistically torture this animal. And I do believe there is a difference with mammals, and especially domesticated animals.
Yeah.
The idea of torture, them
yeah.
is just.
Well, hold on. Oh, the domesticated. I agree with you by and large, but I would just like to say some mammals, elephants, for instance, elephants mourn the dead. They mourn dead elephants. That is showing. Say that again.
Dogs do too.
Yeah, I mean that's showing high order things.
I can tell you, we've had 2 or 3 dogs at a time, and they become a family. And even if they come from different breeds, they've lived together with us, and they're part of our pack. And that's what my wife calls us, our pack. And when one of the dogs passes on, the other dog is in a state of depression, like my wife is, and like I am for a while, because of the death of that animal. I know it's a different process probably going on, but they didn't get that trained into them. That is a feeling like the pillow, you bad boy for chewing the pillow. That was not conditioned. They are just sad and missing.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important to clarify, because we frame it as animal rights, but really we're talking about one right, maybe two. The main right we're talking about that animals may possess is not to be brutalized without purpose.
Exactly.
That's the main thing. Perhaps we're also talking about not being killed for fun. You hear what I mean? Right. Yeah, for sheer fun.
It's the necessity thing. Why are you inflicting pain unnecessarily on a conscious being? That seems always to be immoral. Whatever the law might be, as you agree, and I agree with you, most immorality is legal, unless it is coercive against another human being, a volitional, conceptual human being. It really must be legal. And even if I totally disapprove of it, even if you're using your money to get drunk and high every night, even if you're cheating on your wife systematically and lying to her, I may think you're a despicable person, but it has to be legal. And it's clearly immoral. And let's hope you and I or someone can figure out a way. You see, my brain is trying to figure out a way to justify, given the function of the purpose of government is to protect rights. Its sole function is to use force against force. The tormenting of animals is a kind of force against a conscious being. The function of government is to prevent coercion when it's immoral. Now, we're getting closer step by step by step.
I agree.
But I still haven't, I honestly, Michael, and I would be open and eager to such an argument. Please get me there, someone.
Oh, well, I don't, the problem is for me is this. There's a point in a person's mind, right, where you get that sort of click, right? Where something makes, okay, that's it, I'm convinced. And different people have different thresholds for that click. And when it comes to this, it seems perfectly logical to me that if consciousness, volitional conceptual consciousness, is the source of morality, rights are a moral concept. I mean, that's automatic for me. The purpose of government to protect rights, I got that too. Now, the problem is you have an infant, and I would say infants have some rights. They're not volitional conceptual beings yet. They do have a consciousness and they do experience pain and they are sentient. Some animals are as well. The difference is, like you said, there is the potential for the baby, if left unimpaired, that he's going to develop into a rational being. So that would tell me, okay, well, automatically a baby would have to have more rights than a dog, for instance, right? So that in a collision between where a dog and a baby and the dog's putting the baby at risk, you kill the dog. That's unequivocal to me. But if consciousness is a continuum and I can't escape that fact, I don't see why rights couldn't be. It's just, especially the base level right that we're talking about. We're not saying that dogs and cats have a right to do whatever they want and you can't defend yourself against them and they should be able to run around the neighborhood and eat up people's property or anything like that. What we're saying is that higher order animals, sentient animals, those that demonstrate an awareness of the pain that they're suffering, that they ought not, that they perhaps have a right not to be brutalized. That's not a really big right that we're talking about, especially when we're talking about that somebody that would do that is highly unethical.
Yes, it is a modest limitation on the human involved,
Right.
on their scope of action. All we're saying is don't inflict pain unnecessarily
Yeah.
on the higher animals. You're absolutely right. It's a very modest thing that we're saying the government is doing here. And you know something, if we lived in an objectivist world, and if that were the only controversial law, I don't think even objectivists would complain about it.
No.
They recognize how horribly immoral it is. And we're like,
And Jim, by the way, think about the flip side of what the opposite argument. Is somebody out there that's going to make the argument that we have an absolute right to torture animals?
right. Do we have a right to inflict unnecessary pain on a conscious?
Yeah, I mean that's part of the argument. Is that a right government should defend?
No rational end to it, can there? If you
No.
some rational end, some rational purpose of some kind, and you know what I mean? Of course, rocks and trees don't feel pain. I don't think trees feel pain. So chopping down a tree or throwing a rock against another rock obviously is no issue. But when, like you say, it comes to these higher animals that absolutely feel pain and loyalty and affection for each other and for us, I mean, it is absolutely sadistically, cruelly immoral to inflict unnecessary pain. The immorality part's a no-brainer. And if all we're doing is limiting something, see, that's what I have to do when I say I have to exhale because I really haven't fully worked it out. I have to admit to you, I haven't worked out the parameters on it. The line would have to be unnecessary infliction of pain. In other words, if we did have a rational goal, and even if it did kill or cause pain in an animal, that rational goal supersedes any right the animal has.
Absolutely.
The way we consider it is even different than the way we consider it with children or people with brain damage. It's a different order of consideration. Um, and what it is it's more directed against the human and his cruelty rather than, say, the living condition of the animal. Although, because you see, we can kill animals. We have to be free to be able to kill animals when necessary. So it's our lack of necessity plus their unnecessary pain that puts it together that says, is this the kind of force where government force, and this is the other crucial element here, because when you make something a law, you're letting the police and people like me, prosecutors, come in and say, hey, I can fine you, I can put you in jail for doing this.
Like
Now,
people like me.
I not people, maybe people like you 20 years ago, but not people like you now, my dear brother. No, sir.
Yeah.
And anyway, And I'll tell you something. As a prosecutor, I wouldn't touch a drug case if I could avoid it. As a prosecutor, I handled animal abuse cases. As a prosecutor, I tried to help prostitutes on the street. I'm not trying to help those who were charged with cockfighting. No, I prosecuted those hidden cock. They'll be there. People in this world, and there are different cultures that do it and encourage it too. Not just things like bullfighting. There are certain cultures that absolutely encourage cockfighting, and people will bet on it because if you put two roosters in the same small spot, especially if you encourage them, right? And sometimes what they'll do is they'll attach razor blades to their legs, so that what they'll watch is one bird literally just razor blade hacking to death another rooster. Now these aren't mammals. These are domesticated animals, birds, but still, and chickens are notoriously stupid. My wife grew up on a farm, and she said it's absolutely true. You decapitate a chicken, it can run around for quite some time without a head. It doesn't much need its brain to do most of its functions, and so you're running around like a chicken with its head cut off is a real thing. But on the other hand, even at that level, it seems to me vicious, just vicious that you're watching two roosters in effect kill each other, and you've enhanced it by tying razor blades to their legs so you can watch them tear each other apart. What kind of a life-hating monster would get off on that on any level, enjoy watching that on any level, much less place bets on it, which is what people do, and there are cultures in this world which absolutely encourage it.
I think, Jim, and I'm not 100% by any stretch of the imagination, but I think that I'm prepared if I had to go in a 50-50 way. I think I'm prepared to argue that higher animals have a right to not be unnecessarily tortured. I don't think that's a big stretch. I really don't.
Not a big stretch.
No, if I had to, like, if there was, say there's a God out there, and we're both atheists, right? But if there's a hypothetical God that is the determiner of these things, and I had to make my guess what that God would say, because he's omniscient, I would say he would probably say that, yes, an elephant has the right not to be brutalized. A dog has the right not to be brutalized.
Again, I'll talk a little libertarian here. We hear that African elephants are being driven to extinction, but they will not allow the commercial herding and breeding of elephants. Now, there's an ivory market. The reason why they're being poached to death is because there's not a legal. I mean, humans encourage animals that they use commercially: cows, chickens, pigs, even ones we just enjoy as pets: cats, dogs, goldfish. We encourage the life forms that never go extinct if they're a life form that we had value for. It's just that on a commercial scale, ivory is not allowed to be commercially harvested. They would be humane. First of all, they would live long lives because you want the ivory, the tusks, to grow just as long as possible. So if you were a commercial herder allowed to engage in the free market trading of elephants, you'd have old elephants, and you would feed them well because you want the highest quality ivory. And no doubt you would, when the time came for them to die, probably kill them in a more humane way than nature would have permitted them. That's typically the case with domesticated animals. People always talk about the execution of farm animals. So they're not going to die in nature. So some cat isn't going to grab the bird and let its kittens torment it for the next hour to get practice. No. People have this oogly-eyed view of nature, which is somehow benevolent, and these animals won't die in a more miserable way.
Yeah.
Humans will execute them. That's absurd. Anyway, but you see my point.
No, I do. I think a free private ownership in a free market goes a long way toward solving the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that it also needs to be specified that we're not talking about, to say that it's, say, a dog has the right not to be brutalized, not to be tortured or unnecessarily killed just for fun, right? We're not saying that somebody who does that should get the death penalty, right?
Oh,
Right. Maybe it's not even a prison sentence. Maybe it's a fine. So,
or take from them the right to own pets.
Right. The punishment needs to be commensurate to the rights violation.
Yeah, exactly. You cannot have the care and custody of an animal for the next 3 to 5 years,
Yeah.
something like that, or pay a big fine. There's, I don't know what you feel about community service, but it might be the kind of thing was go volunteer at an animal shelter,
Maybe. Yeah.
buddy, something like that, and get
Yeah.
some empathy for other living creatures. Um,
All right. So look, this is where I think we're at on this subject. I don't think we were going to solve it completely in a 40-minute discussion,
Promising
but I
leads.
think we've got some promising leads. We've got
Exactly.
consciousness exists on a continuum. Consciousness is the source of rights. Maybe rights exist on a continuum. We've said that the one right that perhaps the higher order animals have is not to be brutalized. We've said it's completely unethical to brutalize animals, and maybe there's no right to even do that. So we've also said that a free market and private ownership would go a long way towards solving the problem. And we've said that the punishment, should somebody violate the crime, would have to be commensurate. I think that provides a lot of leads that could be developed. And by the way, I don't think we're being irrational or overly emotional
No.
in the conclusions we're coming to.
No. We understand the differences between animals and people. We're taking that into account. I think we are. And the way I'll put it, the way you put it before is you said you were over the 50-50 mark. Let me put it this way. I may not fully understand my reasons yet, but I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to no animal torture. I'm going to give benefit of the doubt to these laws that prevent people from just
Right.
sadistically tormenting animals.
I'm glad you said that, because for a long time I was pro-life in the abortion debate. For most of my life I've been. But after a while I started waffling a little bit. Murray Rothbard, I thought, made a strong argument about no being has the right to live as a parasite on another. I thought that was a strong argument, and that if a woman wants to eject that, she has the right to. And I'm still not entirely
Adopted that position on abortion myself, and I've developed it a little bit more myself. I honestly think that it's much more powerful to argue, for example, the woman's right to evict this other thing, even if it were a 30-year-old with all the rights in the book, rather than the status of the fetus.
And here's the thing, I'm still not 100% on it, but when I'm in those situations where I don't 100% know, I always go against government involvement. So, right, if I'm not certain, I say keep the government out. That's my default position. Right now, I'm going to maybe contradict myself, because in this case, I'm going to go the other route. Because ultimately my default position is against torture. So that pain is a bad thing.
It involves a kind of physical force or violence that's being used against another
Sure.
living being that's conscious. And that is starting to knock on the door of rights. It may not be fully through the door that we call,
Yeah, right.
but it's come all, like you say, it's a
Yeah.
matter of,
Yeah.
you've
Sure.
certainly come up to the door and started knocking, haven't you?
And the difference is that these animals aren't living inside of the people that are harming
Oh,
them.
no.
And it's serving no purpose. The
Well,
abortion serves a purpose. The
like,
torture of animals serves none.
transfer the responsibility, though. You see, you can't kill the child, nor right now. I know the animal, you could kill the animal, say for the food or the clothes, but the point is that both animal responsibility and parenting are transferable. They're transferable, and that also features into my analysis. Look, you may not have some rational purpose for the animal, but you can't do something purely irrational that's going to cause unnecessary pain to a conscious being. Yeah, there is a conceptual difference between those other things where, again, if there's no force, if there's no thing, that's having aggressive force used against it that's causing the pain, then I say, no, keep the government out. That the only justification for government is because of the application of force. Well, here, if there's an application of force, it's the human against the animal. And there's a conscious being that's suffering as a consequence, a living conscious being that's suffering as a consequence. So, yeah, like I say, you've come all the way to the threshold and we're knocking at the door. So I think it's what we would call a borderline case. And you're right, it's a question of the measurement.
Yeah. And the borderline case, where I'm talking about somebody, one end of this, you're talking about somebody committing a completely immoral act. And on the other side, you're talking about an innocent creature suffering. My borderline decision is going to go in favor of defending the innocent creature.
Yeah, I have to agree. There can be no rational end served by this either. And that I have to take into account. It is for the functioning of reason that people need to be free. And if you can tell me right away that there can be no rational end served, then I'm already halfway there with you, my friend. I may not have the worked out. I may not have the details worked out, but it is for the operation of reason. And it is for the sake of my life. Well, I love animals, okay? But it is for the sake of reason. And I say to myself, the operation of your reason is what needs to be given the freedom. What rational end could possibly be served by forcing another living creature in such a way that it suffers unnecessarily?
Force and mind are opposites, right?
Mind are opposites.
And this is just the complete opposite of mind that we're talking about.
Kind of force being initiated against a conscious living being.
Yes.
So we right there on the threshold of rights, my friend. I have to say, I give the benefit of the doubt to the poor animal right now, like you do.
Now all we have to do is submit this argument to the objectivist gods who decide the right and wrong.
There are people out there who say, well, no, you see, Ayn Rand, animals don't have rights, and why are we even thinking about it? No, but the truth is that I've never met a real objectivist who didn't love animals and wasn't horrified and disgusted at tormenting another living creature. And so, no, like Leonard Peikoff, I want there to be such an argument, but I don't put my feelings ahead of rational argument.
We can't do that.
I think just here today, we've got the great leads that get us perhaps a long way towards a really good rational argument from a couple of different angles.
Beautiful. Okay, Jim, if you have any clothing. Obviously you have clothing. Don't come on the show without clothing. If you have any closing thoughts, feel free to share them. If not, tell the people.
Social convention requires it. I will put on clothing. Only when social convention requires it.
Where can the people find you?
Well, I'm currently in quasi Facebook jail. I can't, but I'm daily on Facebook for professional reasons. I advertise the podcasts because I do several podcasts every week, and I advertise my podcast there. And normally I engage in debate and discussion there, and I'm normally there. I think the restriction will soon lift, but I am moving now over to X and other platforms because I can post, but I can't react or comment. But by the time this lands, hopefully that'll be behind me, and you can get me at Facebook. On the other hand, I have a website, www.creatingchrist.com. I am also regularly appearing on podcasts put on by the Ayn Rand Center UK, just like you are, Michael, and History Valley with Jacob Berman. I'm a frequent guest there too. And so I'm accessible in those ways. I try to make myself accessible. And when Facebook makes me accessible, you can always personally message me there because I'm always trying to answer questions. Feel free to contact me. And I say this is the invitation I always throw out there. If you find something objectionable in what I say, feel free. Private message me on Facebook. Tell me why I'm wrong. And maybe we'll have a dialogue. I can't guarantee I'll always respond. I don't respond to rudeness, but if you put a question to me that seems sincere, no matter how much I might disagree with it, I'll try to answer.
You also don't have a fans only thing going on over there.
Oh, no. Would pay to keep me off fans only. I wouldn't inflict that kind of unnecessary torment on any animal.
Well, Jim, thank you for once again appearing on the show and for a great discussion. For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Leibowitz. Remember, let me know what you think. Until next time.